So it is January 2023. We're back with another episode of the podcast. I want to start it off with a market update. The numbers are in for all of 2022 now that the year is officially over. I want to compare that to 2021, 2020, and then all the years before that, because obviously 2022 was a crazy year in a lot of ways, especially in the real estate market. Everybody knows by now, interest rates really started rising. Really rose in 2022. A lot of talk about what the effect was that was having on the market. Everything from people saying the market has crashed to it's going to crash to it hasn't changed at all. And I think a lot of that comes from national data, things like that are out there that we've been talking about the last few episodes on the podcast. But here in Pittsburgh, things have been pretty stable. So let's look at the numbers though and look what the numbers say. I'm going to start with the sales price, the median sales price for the city of Pittsburgh. This is all of Allegheny County, Butler, Beaver, Washington, and Westmoreland. So 5 counties that make up what we would consider the greater Pittsburgh area. Median sales price in 2022 was $225,000. Prior year, 2021, that number was lower. It was $220,000. So that's a $5,000 increase. That's about a 2.2% appreciation year over year, which is a totally normal number. A normal real estate market, normal housing market, real estate is going to appreciate, they say 1 to 2% every single year. Now, 2020, 2021, we were seeing like 10%, 13% year over year. So those are the crazy numbers that people got used to. And you can see where you go from a 10% appreciation, which is, or let's just say 12% appreciation, that's homes going up in value 1% every month. That's like moving 100 miles an hour on the highway. We slowed down to, 2.2% per year. So that's, whatever that is, 0.2% per month. So we slowed down, 5 times, a fifth of the rate of speed, I guess. Sorry if my numbers aren't adding up. You get the example, I think. It feels like we hit a wall. It feels like the market crashed, but it didn't crash. It just really slammed on the brakes. When you're going 100 miles an hour on the highway and you get off the exit and you got to slow down to 20, it feels like, feels like you're moving backwards. And that's what the market felt like, I think, for a lot of people here. But still moving forward in the right direction, 2.2% appreciation year over year. The total number of sales, this is where it gets kind of interesting, I think. Number of sales kind of represents demand in a sense, although we'll look at that a little bit deeper here in a second. This is the thing that I think really drives the price. The number of sales in 2022 was 24,401, which is down from 28,155 sales in 2021. So it's down about 4,000 sales. I don't know what the percentage of that is. I guess that's about 1/6 or 1/7 of the total number of sales. So a significant number. But that we're looking at 2022 compared to 2021. Neither one of those were what I would call a normal year. So what is actually normal? Well, in 2020, it was 26,000. So again, keep in mind, 2022, the total number of sales was 24,401. In 2020, it was 26,000. And if you look at any of the 3 years for that, prior to that, it's about 25,000 sales per year, give or take. So 24,000 is not that far behind what I would consider a normal year if we look at 2019, 2018, and 2017 and consider those are all normal years. Still strong sellers markets, really strong sellers markets, but not 100 miles an hour, right? That's normal highway speed. Those were 55 mile per hour markets, not 100 mile per hour markets, I guess we're going to use that analogy. So again, 2022 was not that far off of a normal year in terms of the number of sales. Now what's even more interesting, I think, is if we look at the total number of listings, and I looked at the total number of new listings, not active listings. And I think really the only difference, if we really want to break down, what's a new listing versus an active listing, is these are listings that came on the market January, February, March, April, May, through December. These are not listings that carried over from December of 2021 and were still active on the market in January. These are new listings that came on the market. Total number of new listings, 29,232. In 2021, that number was 32,353. So we have 3,000 less new listings this year than we did the prior year. That's a lot less listings. Still more listings than there was sales. That seems to be the case in any year. In 2020, we had 30,000 listings. So 2020 was actually closer to 2022 in terms of the number of listings. Years prior to that, though, that number is actually more like 33,000. So if we're going to say a normal year, there's about 33,000 new listings in any given calendar year in the Pittsburgh greater area. Last year, 2022, there was only 29,000. So there was almost 4,000 less new listings in 2022. So it's interesting. There was more sales than a normal year, but there was less listings. The year that had the highest number of sales, probably ever, also, coincidentally, was the year that had the highest number of listings, at least going back for the last 5 or 10 years. I don't know that it was the highest ever in terms of number of new listings. So it's interesting because we talk about supply and demand as if it's this scale where demand goes up, supply goes down. Supply goes up, demand goes down. But the demand is going to be there regardless of the supply, I think. It's just that demand can only go so far, right? If 10 people want to go buy one product and there's only one product, then you can only have one sale. Only one of those people is going to get it. Now, if there's 10 people and they see there's only one product and 8 of them say, "Oh, never mind, I don't feel like fighting over it," and they walk away, now you only have 2 really what we would call probably like qualified buyers that are going after that product. So what's interesting is when when the supply gets really low, it starts to actually, in my observation, it starts to actually impact the demand, and the demand starts to get lower. As the number of new listings rises, I think more buyers see that there's more options out there. There's more things for them to go out and actually look at in person, more open houses for them to actually attend, and then they get moving in the process. Most buyers, once they get to the point where they've reached out to us or we've talked to them, connected with them, and taken them to see houses, or they've started going to open houses, most of the time, once that ball starts rolling, they're gonna take it all the way to completion. They're not gonna stop after looking at 10 houses and say, "You know what, never mind, we don't want to move. We want to stay in the house that we're in." But they might look online at 10 houses and never see anything they want, and then get tied up doing something else, and they're not really into it until they actually have homes that they see that they can go out and start looking at in person. So that's the interesting thing about the numbers. Sales price up, number of sales down, number of listings also down. So I think the key factor that's going to drive the market in 2023, the primary factor, I think, is going to be inventory. It's going to continue to be inventory. Inventory was the factor that drove the market every year prior to COVID, and even during COVID, I think, up to this year. This year is really when we started to look at interest rates as something that was impacting demand. But I think more important than that, and what people forget, is the inventory and the level of inventory that's out there. Now, when you hit a trifecta like we kind of did in October, where interest rates have gone way up, inventory is way down, and it's September, October, it's seasonally not the time where the demand is highest anyways, then you're really going to see an impact. But going into the spring market, we've already seen it within the last months. A lot of people are saying, how long are we going to wait? We're not going to wait forever. If they've been waiting since last year for the rates to go down, then they've already been waiting a year, and they've only gone up. So the time to buy, for most people, I think they're going to realize it's either going to be this spring, or they wait another year and risk another year of just living in the same apartment or whatever it is that they're doing. That's one more year out of your life. That's a significant portion. We're not here for 1,000 years. We're only here for 80 years if we're lucky, to spend 1 or 2 or 3 of those years, that's a significant portion of your life, sitting around in an environment, in a house that you're not happy in, waiting for interest rates to change, something that you have absolutely no control over. None of us really do. It's just not worth it. I think people are going to have to adjust their expectations. You can always lower your price range, move now, and then move again in 3 to 5 years. You can always refinance if you are in the place that you really want to stay in forever. But that's the kind of things that people are going to have to do.
So that's for the buyers. What about the sellers? Do you have any suggestion? Like if they should list the house this year, what do you see the seller's market is?
So it's still a seller's market because we still have, I think, more demand, more buyers out there than we do listings. It's funny because if you look at the number of total sales versus the number of listings, the number of total sales is always lower than the number of listings. But I don't think that number of sales represents necessarily the number of buyers, especially when we look at, these are calendar years. When you look at things that have carried over, sales that have carried over, things that are closing in January, went under contract in November of the year before. This year the number of sales was, if you look at month over month, which I didn't really talk about, I didn't even write these numbers down because I don't think it's as significant. People aren't buying a house just to live in it for a month. So if you bought your house in November, don't worry about what the market's doing in December. You've got other things to worry about. But if you look at the month over month numbers, or year over year in just the month of December 2022 compared to December of other years, that number of sales was down. But I think if those closed sales that closed in December went under contract in October, and that's right when the market really started. The interest rates really started to increase, right? So yeah, it had that temporary impact, but it was also October. So when people say we're just going to wait, indefinitely, we're going to wait until the interest rates go down, whatever. But what they're saying is they're going to wait. Well, here we are. It's January. Come February, March, when we start, kids are going on spring break, and we start thinking about the end of the school year and all the other factors that kind of motivate people to move during that time. I don't think a lot of people are going to want to, wait a whole nother year when they've already been waiting 6 months or possibly up to a year. The biggest thing for sellers, I think, is where they're going to go next. A lot of sellers obviously have to buy something to move into, so I don't think the advice really is any different. If you are selling and for whatever reason not worrying about buying, I mean, that does happen. People rent, people move into with family, people move into assisted living, all of that. Again, a year is a long time. If you've got to move, you've got to move. I mean, we've got four listings that we took photos on this week, or I guess that we were supposed to take photos on this week. They've all been waiting since mid-December. So we were telling people, don't list your house on Christmas weekend, right? Christmas fell on a Sunday this year, so New Year's falls on a Sunday. Yeah. So from the second week of December through really this coming weekend, it's January 4th right now, or 5th. 5th. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. But we're going into the first weekend of the year, and this is really the first non-holiday weekend that makes sense for somebody to put their house on the market within the last month, right? So, but these people haven't been waiting really long. You've got a couple that has already moved out of their house into their new house a few months ago. They were making some repairs and getting the house updated and got ready in mid-December. We said, well, wait till after the holidays. We'll hit it the first or second week of January. We've got another couple, unfortunately, where they passed away, so it's an estate. The executor, the family member that's handling that estate, I mean, they're not going to take care of that empty house for another year just to wait for the interest rates to go up. The house needs to sell. A lot of houses that are on the market these last few years are estates. It's people that have passed away. People are staying in their houses longer. People are not moving as often. It's not every 7 years anymore. That used to be the statistic. The average person moves every 7 years. That changed to 9 to 11 to 13, I think, at one point. and those are averages, right? So what I see is there's still people that move after 6 months, but there's people that stay in their house for 40, 50 years. Um, the baby boomer generation was one of the largest generations, looking at population. Millennials obviously is a larger generation. You've got one generation that's, kind of in that downsizing phase, or, unfortunately even, passing away at the end of their lifetime. And then you've got that millennial buyer group who's really just at that prime age of buying a home. And we talk about that like every week. So yeah, I mean, when somebody passes away and their family has to, settle their estate and sell their things, it's unfortunate, but it does happen. It's a significant chunk of the homes that are out there on the market. You're not gonna wait. The other two are somebody that lives out of town and had properties here that they were kind of using as rental properties, waiting and anticipating, I think, that they were going to come back to Pittsburgh. At some point, maybe live in one of those properties, or at least be able to manage them a little bit better locally, and realized, hey, they're probably not coming back, and managing these single family properties from a far distance is not really the lifestyle that they want to. They don't want to be a landlord. So I mean, what's that person going to do? Sit on those vacant houses and continue to pay mortgages and property taxes and everything else for another year, just to wait and hope that the interest rates go down a little bit and the price goes up. Why would you do that? The price is up. It's up 2%. I would anticipate it's going to go up another 2 or 3% in the next year. 3% on a again, median sales price is $225,000. So that means next year the median sales price is probably going to be around $230,000. That's $5,000 in most cases. If we're looking at medians or averages in the city, just owning a home for another year could cost you $5,000 or $6,000 easy, between the property taxes, if you have a mortgage, interest and stuff like that, homeowners insurance. And then the biggest thing that I think a lot of people miss, the biggest thing that people forget, even when somebody knows they want to make a move in the fall, but they say we're going to wait until spring, and they go through winter and they get a roof leak, or their furnace gives out, or they go to kick on the air conditioning in the summer and the air conditioning gives out, or any number of other things. The refrigerator breaks, the stove breaks, the dishwasher breaks. I mean, that could be, any one of those appliances could be $1,000, $2,000. A roof could be $10,000 to $20,000. A furnace and an air conditioning could be anywhere from probably $8,000 to $12,000, somewhere in that ballpark, I guess. These are big expenses, right? Like, the longer you live in the house, the more deferred maintenance you're going to have to do. Waiting just based on the interest rates and stuff, I don't think is a good strategy. If you're waiting because you're truly not in a position where you're ready to move, waiting for the sake of waiting for the interest rates, waiting for the market, I don't think is ever a good strategy. If you're waiting for some other reason, like, look at the reason why you're moving or why you're thinking about buying or selling in the first place. If that reason or that purpose is telling you to wait, then you should wait. If everything else is telling you should move now, but the interest rates just aren't what you would like them to be, and you have no control and no idea of when that number is even going to change, or if it changes, is it going to be better or worse? I wouldn't do that. Nobody ever, I shouldn't say never, but people rarely win by trying to time markets, whether it's the real estate market, the stock market, bonds, crypto, any of that stuff. I mean, somebody's always selling at what they think is the top, and then 6 months later they regret that they sold too early because it continued to go up. Or somebody's always, not selling and then wishing they would have 3 months later. Like, the markets just change like that over the most, what seems to us to be like the most insignificant things. And there's just nothing that we can do about it. So, if you've got reasons and you've got motivations that are telling you to move, I think you should look at that option. Right now it's, January. For the next few months, I don't anticipate really sitting down with anybody and saying, no, we should wait for this. Like I said, mid-December, we were telling people, well, no point listing right now. Let's get the house ready for the next 3-4 weeks. Even if it is ready, let's just sit tight. But we're here now. Holidays are over. If it's time to move, if this is the year that you're ready to move, then start the process. As far as like differences in the market and what this kind of normal market is going to bring, and kind of what sellers and buyers really should expect, I think it's a lot of what we've been talking about with contingencies coming back, home inspection contingencies, appraisal contingencies, all this stuff coming back. These are normal things. These are in 2019, I was telling every seller, like, the buyer's going to do a home inspection. There's no question. Very rarely would a buyer waive a home inspection, and weird reasons why anybody would do that. The other thing is, contingencies. Well, I guess contingencies are never necessarily good for the seller, but home inspections can be very good for the seller. It's not all bad. It's a buyer waiving a home inspection is not all good when you're the seller, because there's the whole topic and question of liability. Renegotiating a contract sucks. After you've landed on a price, you've negotiated, and then the buyer does a home inspection, and what do? They come back and they want to ask you to make a bunch of repairs that you don't want to make because you're trying to get ready to move out of the house, or they want to renegotiate on the price, which you don't want to do because you've already got a number in your mind and you've got your heart set on that number. No matter how logical or rational of a person you are, you're still that number's there, right? It's hard to forget, hey, this number was $300,000 and now it's $290. I just lost $10,000, right? Like, it's $10,000 you never had in the first place. It doesn't exist, but you have that number in your mind, and it sucks when you have to renegotiate.
So should sellers do inspection before they list the house? Will that help with the situation?
That's a good question, and that's a good point. That's actually something that I wanted to touch on. And I think what I wanted to say or get to before that is, renegotiating sucks, but getting sued after you've already closed on the house, that sucks a lot worse. That's even worse. That's going to take up even more of your time and probably end up costing you more money. So there's a couple ways to, I think, protect yourself as a seller from being in that position. Then the first one is home inspection. Whether that's the buyer doing the home inspection, or there is, sellers can hire a home inspector and get the home inspection done themselves before they even put the house on the market. There's options like Seller's Shield, which has to do with seller's disclosures. It's like a legal shield or one of these services. There's a lot of them out there. It's basically like an insurance policy that covers legal fees for any number of things, but in this case, it's specifically related to seller's disclosure, and if there would be a lawsuit in the future where the buyer comes back after closing and something's wrong with the property and they say, we think the seller was aware of it and they failed to disclose it, so we're suing them for the damages or whatever. Seller Shield is a policy that essentially would pay your legal fees. It's an insurance policy where they'll cover the legal fees if that situation comes up. So just like car insurance, right? Car insurance doesn't prevent you from getting into an accident, but car insurance is there to help you with the damages, whether that be legal fees or physical property damage and things like that, medical fees and stuff like that. Can't prevent it from happening, but it's there to kind of protect or assist or shield you from the damage obviously being as bad as what it could be. The third thing that I think can protect the seller or help a seller protect themselves from being in a situation like that is a home warranty. Usually the seller is the one offering the home warranty to the buyer up front, and usually the seller is the one paying for it. Now the buyer does have the option to buy their own home warranty, or they can, the cost of it can be split. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes we'll have a buyer that will ask for a home warranty even if the seller wasn't offering it or advertising it. The buyer's making their offer. They're saying, this is what we want, this is the price we're willing to pay. So you can put a warranty into that, factor the cost, I guess, of a home warranty into it. A home warranty is another like policy, like an insurance policy that covers the repair of items in the house. So again, can't keep anything from breaking, but if something does break, that policy would cover the cost. And of course, there's limitations and stipulations and all that stuff on what they cover and how much cost they'll actually cover. Um, but just real simple example, if you have a home warranty and it covers your furnace and your furnace gives out within usually it's a year, within the term of that warranty, within that first year, then you call the home warranty company, they send somebody out to fix it and they pay for it, or they'll pay, up to $2,000 or something like that. And if it's more than that, then you might have to pay the rest. But they're good. We've had people that have gotten new furnaces and new air conditioners and roof repairs and electrical repairs and all kinds of stuff on home warranties. We've had some people that, unfortunately that something breaks and it's not covered for one reason or another, but it's not one of those things. Just to kind of dispel a couple myths here about home warranties, it's not like an insurance policy in the sense where they're always trying to get out of covering it in any way that they can. A lot of the times, the majority of the time, if it's something that they're supposed to cover, they will cover it. It's actually pretty rare that we come across circumstances where through some loophole or something like that, the home warranty company says, no, we're not going to cover it. The warranty companies deal primarily with the agents, right? So there's only there's probably a dozen or more home warranty companies out there, but there's a handful of reputable ones around here. Usually, like with us and most other agents, once you find a home warranty company that has treated your clients well in the past, you've got a good rep. I've got somebody. There's multiple home warranty companies, 2 or 3, but I know the reps. We know we can call them. We know we can get questions answered, whether it's prior to the closing or if the client calls us 3 months after the closing because something broke. We know we can get the customer service and communication that we need, and that 90% of the time those issues are getting fixed, and it's not something where they're trying to weasel out of it. If it wasn't good for our clients, we just wouldn't be recommending it, or wouldn't be recommending, I guess, those companies. So home warranties are great. Again, just to kind of dispel the myths, as a seller, you're not warrantying anything. You're not guaranteeing that refrigerator is not going to break. You're not paying for it if it breaks 3 months after the closing. You're buying them a typically 1-year policy for usually $500 or $600. Some of them have gotten a little more expensive now because the cost of everything's gone up, but around $600, and that policy will cover for a year. You as the seller, you're done. After the closing, they're not going to call you. Now, if you don't have a home warranty, they still shouldn't call you, but they might. The home warranty just kind of adds a layer in between there. Their first call should be to the home warranty company, and it's rare at that point, if something wouldn't be covered, that they would come back and try to claim that the seller had something to do with it. And again, if they've done a home inspection, then it's like their first call is the home warranty company, their second call is the home inspection company, the third call is the agent, and then after all of that, they might call a lawyer. But if they've done a home inspection, if you've got the seller show coverage and you've got the home warranty, then as the seller, you should be in pretty good shape. Again, you can't prevent any of these things from happening. And in America, you can't prevent somebody from suing you if they want to, but you can certainly protect yourself and give yourself that shield, as they call it, to help with those things.
Cool.
So you asked me about what pre-listing home inspections, where the seller actually gets the home inspected first. Yeah. So, again, knowing that most buyers are going to do a home inspection, as far as like liability's sake, it's probably not the most necessary thing. If a buyer for some reason opts not to want to do a home inspection, you can always try to negotiate and ask them to do a home inspection. You could even pay for the home inspection at that point just without the contingency. In other words, the contingency in the contract says this agreement is contingent or dependent on us doing a home inspection and being satisfied with the results. And if we're not, then we reserve the right to back out of this sale or renegotiate. Anytime you have the right to back out, you have the right to renegotiate, because that's your leverage. If you don't, we're going to ask for something, and if you won't give it to us, we're going to back out. If you want to keep us in the sale, keep the deal going, get to the closing, and not have to go back on the market, then you'll give us what you want, or we'll come to some mutual agreement. So that's what the contingency says. You can waive the contingency and still do a home inspection. If you don't like the results of the home inspection, you're still bound by the agreement. You still have to buy the house, or you're in default of the agreement, and you risk, losing your hand money and all of that. Mm-hmm. It's another thing, obviously, you have to talk to an attorney about. We're not attorneys, but that's in kind of a real simple overview, my opinion anyways, of what a contingency actually is. So best case scenario probably for a seller is that the buyer does a home inspection but waives the contingency, and then it's just for information purposes, and then there's a written report, a record that they knew what they were buying. So if something breaks after the fact, it doesn't necessarily come back on you as the seller. But I think that the trade-off with the seller doing the home inspection pre-listing is the certainty that you're going to get from that. And it's kind of a trade-off. It's like a three-way scale between certainty, money, and time.
Yeah.
Where's your values? Some people value the money more. They're willing to take a little bit of risk. They're willing to take on a little bit of uncertainty if they know that the result could be more money. Of course, they can't be certain that it's more money because they're exchanging certainty for money or time, right? Some people need to sell their house today. We've talked about that before too. It's kind of rare that somebody needs to sell it today versus tomorrow, but some people need to sell their house today, and time is of the utmost importance, even if they have to lose money, and even if they have to exchange in some way some level of certainty. And it's one of those things where you can kind of pick two and sacrifice one. Again, it's a three-sided scale, so there is a balance. But if you're somebody that absolutely values certainty, doesn't want to deal with uncertainty, and values certainty more than money or more than time, then home inspection could be right for you. In other words, that home inspection is going to cost you as the seller money that, typically the buyer pays for the home inspection when they do it, but in this case, you're doing the home inspection, so you'll pay for it. It's going to take some time. I mean, you're going to have to schedule to get on the inspector's schedule, which, could be a week by the time you get on their schedule. They come do the inspection, you get the reports and everything, and actually have a chance to review them. That could be a week or two. But then you're going to have to make the repairs. There's no point in getting a home inspection done and saying, we did a home inspection. Here's a list of everything that's wrong with our house, right? Like, the buyers aren't going to like that. So you have to do the home inspection and then make most, if not all, of the repairs that the inspector finds, which a lot of the times, a lot of those repairs are like cheap little things. And if it is something that's big and expensive, you can be pretty certain that the buyer's inspection would have found it anyways, and you would have ended up paying for it regardless. So again, the logical, rational way of looking at it as a seller is, you get to that point where you've landed on a price, the buyer does their inspection, they find a major issue, and they're asking for a price reduction. And it's, we had our heart set on this price, but that was never reality, and we were going to end up having to do this anyways. But, again, if you don't want to be in the moment and finding that out 2 weeks, into the transaction after you've already taken the house off the market, you've already started moving, you want to gain some certainty, you want to exchange some money and some time, get the pre-listing home inspection, take the time and spend the money to make all of or most of the repairs anyways that are coming up on that home inspection, so that you can show that to the buyer and say, here's everything we did to get our house ready. It really will give the buyer peace of mind about what they're buying. They still may want to do their own home inspection anyways, but again, you have some certainty going into that their inspector's probably not going to find too much, if anything, that your inspector didn't already point out and that you haven't already addressed. So it takes a little bit more money, more time, and there's no telling that you're going to get that money back. Again, at the end of the day, you are disclosing to the buyer up front things that you may have not otherwise known about, so you may not otherwise disclose. You are providing the buyers at that point with, hey, here's a list of everything that's wrong with our house. So from a marketing standpoint, it's not the best thing. Again, some buyers are very rational and logical, so they'll look at that and say, oh, this is great that they did the home inspection and now we're aware of it, and we put some value on that, so we are willing to pay a little more money up front. But a lot of buyers looking at that from an emotional standpoint are going to say, oh my God, look at all the things that are wrong with this house. again, logically, they're going to do their own home inspection and they're going to find all those things anyways. It's just a matter of them finding them up front and their initial offer reflecting those repairs rather than, secondary offer where they're coming in and asking to renegotiate. So it's not for everyone. But there are some trade-offs, and it is kind of a no-brainer for some people if you really value, that level of certainty. There's a possibility, you know, with no amount of certainty that the buyer may be willing, may come in and do the inspection and be willing to take on all those repairs. In which case, you're the luckiest seller in the world if you get that BRI back after the buyer does their home inspection and they check the box next to accept as is, as opposed to the other box right below it that says, here's the list of repairs we want you to make, or here's the price reduction we want you to make, or we want this credit or this seller's assist. It's rare, but I mean, it does happen. You really are looking for a specific buyer who's very handy in that case, and there's usually some sort of trade-off. If the person is going to do all the work, then that means they probably value their own time, and so they're going to want some money to reflect that. So those are kind of the trade-offs there. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And I feel like the pre-listing inspection can help the seller to make up their mind better with the price. Kind of like if it has a lot of problems, I guess you can lower your expectations. You can lower the price. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's both parties going into that initial negotiation with a clear view of what they're buying and what they're selling. So yeah, I mean, you can disclose all those things to the buyer up front if you've got an agent who's good in kind of coaching you through negotiations. You can disclose all those things up to the buyer up front, and they come in and say, well, in light of all of this, this is the value that we think the house is worth. You can still negotiate that up. You're going to probably be in a better position, again, in terms of certainty, where if you negotiate that price up, you're probably going to stay there. The buyer at that point may not even do their own home inspection if you've already provided them with one. If we're talking about liability and all that stuff, I don't even want to get into that because I'm not an attorney and that can go a lot of different ways. I will say that in my opinion, I don't think that the seller providing the buyer with the home inspection provides the same level of protection for the seller that the buyer doing their own home inspection does. Reason being, I don't think that the buyer has the same level of recourse against that home inspector if they never had any agreement or contract with that home inspector to begin with. They're not a customer of that inspector, so I don't think they have the recourse to then come back and say, hey, you messed up this inspection. The inspector could say, it wasn't your inspection in the first place, so what do you care? Obviously they care because they bought the house based on that inspection. So from a liability standpoint, there's some things there, but from a reality standpoint, my experience and what I've seen is a lot of the times the buyers will waive their home inspection in light of the seller's home inspection. But again, that can be negotiated. You can waive the contingency, but they can still do the home inspection for information purposes. If something catastrophic does come up and they didn't have that contingency in there, they still terminate the sale. They might lose their hand money, but it's better to lose $2,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 than to buy a house that's sinking into the ground. That's going to be a loss of $200,000 or $300,000. That's really why we do those inspections and things in the first place. It's not so that you can go and nitpick about GFI outlets and stuff like that. That's just that's the reality of what it's turned into, and that's the kind of things that buyers typically ask for. So if you don't mind taking your chances after you're already under contract and going around and changing out some outlets, then let the things just kind of take their course. And but if you're really the kind of person that values that certainty and needs to know, almost 100%, you'll never be 100%, but if you really value knowing, what's going to happen next, then sure, that's going to be a good way to do it.
But inspection can't guarantee that the house is not going to have a problem, right? What if the inspector said that the house is fine and maybe during the year has some problem? Like, what should the buyer to look for? To go back to the inspector or?
Yeah, I mean, obviously those things do happen, and then exactly, you're right. An inspection does not guarantee that nothing's going to happen. It's, it's an inspection. The house could be fine during the inspection, and the next day, all the pipes could
Yeah.
break. The inspectors can't see what's inside the walls. Inspectors can't see what's under the ground, right? Um, there's rare occasions where very significant things that didn't exist when the home inspector did their inspection can arise 6 months later, or even 3 days later. Unfortunately, we've seen in some cases. Yeah, I mean, again, not an attorney. I don't want to ever see anybody have to pursue any issue like that, and I don't like to see any of our home inspector partners or anything like that obviously getting into situations where they're getting sued. But yeah, most of the time the first call is going to be to the home inspector. Um, Depending on what the issue is, if it's some sort of emergency, your first call should be to the contractor who can come out and fix it. Or if there's like a leak or something, get the leak turned off, or like get the water turned off, get the leak stopped so there's not further damage, and then worry about it. You can call the home warranty company if you have a home warranty and get them to send somebody out. The one thing about home warranties is it's not an emergency service, right? So unfortunately, if you're buying a house with a 30-year-old furnace and you've got a home warranty that covers it for a year, yeah, you've got that kind of coverage or that insurance that they're going to cover some of that. But if it breaks in the middle of winter on the coldest day of the year, warranty is not like an emergency service program. It might take, and by the way, there's not too many, there's not too many emergency services truly out there where if your furnace breaks, it's going to be replaced within 24 hours anyways. But the home warranty companies may take 24 to 48 hours to respond, and then they, just like anybody else would, they have to order parts and they have to do all of this. So you might go a week without heat in the winter, in
Oh
which
my
case
gosh.
use space heaters or whatever you got to do. Um, they're not gonna they're not gonna replace the furnace before it breaks. So if you're buying a house with a 30-year furnace, that home warranty is going to offer you some protection, but I mean it's limited. Um, that is probably the one complaint that I hear. But again, even without home warranties, I mean, you still hear the complaint about our furnace is broken and we can't get anybody out here until tomorrow, or we had somebody come out and look at it but they can't fix it. What are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
That's just life. That's reality. It sucks. Um, that's the complaint that I hear about home warranties is they couldn't get somebody out here for 48 hours and we need it fixed before then. Well, if you even can get somebody in there faster than that, which sometimes you can. I mean, there are like emergency plumbers and stuff like that. They can fix a leak, but it doesn't mean they're going to have a furnace in stock or
Yeah.
parts like that. Something like that. Um, so keep that in mind, I guess. But yeah, so first call, home warranty, contractors. Second call usually ends up being the home inspector. Um, and then hopefully you can just get it resolved before it ever gets to the point where you have a situation that's serious enough where you have to pursue like getting an attorney and
Mm-hmm.
actually, in that case, who would you even go after, right? You go after the seller, but you can't sue the seller just because something broke 6 months after they sold you the house.
Yeah.
You would have to try to sue them on the basis that they knew there was a problem. They intentionally or maliciously, covered up that problem or failed to disclose that problem, um, to basically get you to buy the house without knowing about that problem. Um, and it's going to be very hard to prove that. So again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not telling anybody not to pursue their legal options or whatever they feel like they need to do, but that's just not it's not the number one call that I would be making if it was myself in that position. Uh, and hopefully it won't be, and obviously we hope none of our clients or anybody that's like listening or watching this ever does find themselves in those kind of devastating situations, but unfortunately it does happen. I
Yeah.
mean, we had, I mentioned before, we were supposed to have 4 listings this week and we had 3. I went on Monday to attend a photo shoot in the first house that I walked into. We had 2 photo shoots that day. The first one, I opened the door and there's a waterfall coming from the living room ceiling.
Really? Oh
Yeah, it
my
was terrible.
gosh.
It was like the most devastating thing I've ever seen because the house is vacant. It's probably been doing that for like a week. There's just so much water in that house, and it was just pouring out of the ceiling. I couldn't get the water off. I mean, I'm not a plumber. I don't have any tools with me or anything like that. But I'm like, what do I do? I tried to turn the water off and couldn't get it off. Had to call PWSA, the water authority, to see if they could come and shut it off from like the meter, which they couldn't either. The whole thing was like a nightmare. So the devastating damage done to this property. Fortunately, if we're looking for the bright side here, the guy doesn't live in the house, so he's not homeless. But I don't know what's going to happen as far as the repairs, things like that. Unfortunately, can happen.
So is the house flooded?
Oh yeah, it was. I mean,
Oh
it
my
was
gosh.
it was bad. Yeah, and that's he only bought the house not too long ago. We helped him buy the house. There's nothing that
Oh no.
had nothing to do with any issue that probably existed a year or 2 years ago, whenever it was that he bought it. Nothing that an inspector would ever in a million years find. Nothing that a plumber would probably ever in a million years find. Um, just a really like unfortunate sequence of events. We don't know exactly what caused it, but
I wonder how long it was broken for.
a while was my guess. But
A
yeah,
while,
I have no
wow.
idea.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, terrible. So things like that do happen. It's obviously rare, fortunately, but uh, all you can do is try to protect yourself against that stuff.
So for a house like that, if the pipe break and the owner is not living there, and if you didn't go check on it, what would happen? It would just keep leaking? Like the
I
water
guess.
association wouldn't like send you a reminder or something that
I think eventually they probably would realize, like, hey, this water bill's normally $200 a month, and he's up to 3,000 or something like that. They're using a lot of water. There must be a leak, but in this case, the water authority couldn't even get into the house, so somebody needed to go over and let them in anyways. Um, just a bad situation. So yeah, I mean, I would eventually the water authority would step in, but they don't. I don't. I mean, they can only monitor how much water somebody's using. At what point does somebody notice that and say this seems like a very substantial amount of extraordinary amount of water that this person's using? Maybe we should give them a call. So, I mean, they've got thousands of customers. They don't have one person sitting there just staring at
yeah,
every
but
meter.
that must be like a big damage then.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, but it happens. That's why you have like insurance and stuff like that, which hopefully you won't have any issue with the insurance. But again, insurance doesn't cover. It doesn't prevent accidents from happening, but it can protect you or help kind of aid in the recovery from a
Yeah.
financial standpoint, really. All right, so that's it. That's another episode, I guess, of the podcast. So if you're still watching this, thanks for watching. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like this video, leave a comment. Let us know your stories or your questions that you have about any of the topics that we talked about here today. If you're in the Pittsburgh market, thinking about buying, selling, or investing in real estate here, reach out to us. Give my team and I a call. All of our info should be on the YouTube page or Facebook or wherever you're watching this, Instagram. I will see everybody next week for the next episode, possibly in a new space. We'll see. It might be a little different scenery here. And yeah, thanks for watching. Have a good week.
See you guys.